The cargo hauler Prometheus drifted through the void like a dying whale, its hull scarred by micrometeorites and decades of hard service. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, watching the star charts flicker on her tactical display. The Kepler 442 system stretched before them, 6 planets orbiting a dying orange dwarf that had seen better millennia. "Ma'am, we're picking up something strange on the third planet," reported Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. His dark eyes reflected the amber glow of his console as he frowned at the readings. "It's not showing up on any of our databases." Sarah moved to his station, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal deck plating. After 15 years hauling supplies to the outer colonies, she had learned to trust her crew's instincts. Torres had been with her for 8 of those years, and his sensor readings had saved their lives more than once. "What kind of strange?" she asked, peering over his shoulder at the scrolling data. "Energy signatures like nothing I've ever seen. The planet should be dead, its way outside the habitable zone, covered in ice and methane storms. But there's something down there generating massive amounts of thermal energy. And the readings," he paused, shaking his head, "they're almost organic in nature." Dr. Marcus Webb, the expedition's xenobiologist, looked up from his research terminal. His weathered face showed the kind of excitement that had driven humanity to the stars in the first place. "Organic, are you certain?" "As certain as I can be with equipment held together by prayer and duct tape," Torres replied. "The energy patterns are rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Whatever's down there, it's big, really big." Sarah felt the familiar tingle of discovery mixed with caution. The Prometheus was on a routine supply run to the mining colonies in the Vega sector, but their cargo manifest included several xenobiological research teams. If they had stumbled onto something significant, it could change everything for the underfunded expedition. "Dr. Webb, what's your assessment?" she asked. The scientist was already pulling up atmospheric readings and geological surveys. "The planet's designation is, according to the Colonial Survey from 2387, it was marked as uninhabitable and ignored. Surface temperature averages -120 Celsius. Atmosphere is 90% methane with trace nitrogen and carbon dioxide. No one set foot on it in over 60 years. "Until now," Sarah muttered. She made her decision with the kind of quick thinking that had kept her crew alive in the outer reaches. "Torres, plot a course for the planet. Dr. Webb, start prepping your team. If there's life down there, we need to document it properly." "Captain," interrupted Chief Engineer Paula Rodriguez from her station near the rear of the bridge. "With respect, we're already 3 days behind schedule. The mining colonies are expecting their supplies, and our contract specifically states." "The contract also includes provisions for scientific discovery," Sarah cut her off. "Besides, we're talking about potentially the greatest biological discovery in human history. The colonies can wait another day or 2. Rodriguez muttered something in Spanish that probably wasn't complimentary, but she returned to monitoring their aging reactor core. Sarah knew the engineer was right about their schedule, but some opportunities only came once in a lifetime. As the Prometheus changed course, Sarah found herself staring out the main viewport at the growing planet. Kepler 442c appeared as a pale blue marble swirled with white clouds of frozen methane. It looked peaceful, almost serene, but she had learned long ago that the most beautiful things in space were often the most dangerous. 12 hours later, they achieved orbit around the planet. The energy readings that Torres had detected were stronger now, emanating from somewhere beneath the southern polar ice cap. Dr. Webb's preliminary scans revealed a complex network of caverns and thermal vents that created a massive underground ecosystem. "It's incredible," Webb breathed, studying the data streams flowing across his screens. "The thermal activity is creating pockets of liquid water beneath the ice. The energy signature suggests some kind of massive organism, possibly hibernating or in a state of dormancy." Sarah gathered her senior staff in the ship's cramped conference room. The Prometheus had been built for cargo, not exploration, so their facilities were basic at best. She looked around at the faces of her crew, Torres, Rodriguez, Webb, and her security chief, Commander James "Tank" Morrison. These people had followed her through asteroid fields, solar flares, and pirate attacks. She trusted them with her life. "All right, people, here's what we know," she began, activating the holographic display at the center of the table. The image of Kepler 442c rotated slowly, highlighting the energy readings from the polar region. We've got something big down there, something that's been hidden under the ice for who knows how long. Dr. Webb thinks it might be a previously unknown form of life. Tank leaned forward, his scarred hands clasped together. The former colonial marine had seen action in the Proxima Wars and bore the marks to prove it. What kind of threat assessment are we looking at, Doc? Webb adjusted his glasses nervously. Unknown. The organism appears to be dormant, but its size is unprecedented. The energy readings suggest something at least several kilometers in length, possibly much larger. Several kilometers, Rodriguez whistled low. What the hell could grow that big? That's what we need to find out, Sarah said. I'm proposing a limited surface expedition. We take the shuttle down, establish a temporary base camp near the thermal vents, and send a probe into the cavern system. Minimal risk, maximum information. Tank shook his head. Ma'am, with respect, there's no such thing as minimal risk when dealing with unknowns this size. If whatever's down there wakes up and doesn't like visitors, we could be looking at a serious problem. Which is why you'll be leading the security detail, Sarah replied. Dr. Webb, how long would you need for a preliminary investigation? 48 hours minimum, possibly 72 if we can establish communication protocols. Communication, Torres raised an eyebrow, with what? The energy patterns suggest a level of complexity that goes beyond simple biological functions. There's a rhythm to it, almost like language. If this organism is sentient, we need to approach it carefully. Sarah made her decision. We go down in 6 hours. Tank, I want you to select 2 Marines for security. Torres, you're with us to monitor energy readings from the surface. Rodriguez, you stay with the ship and keep our escape route warm. Captain, Rodriguez protested, that reactor core is older than my grandmother. If something goes wrong while you're planetside, then you fix it just like you always do, Sarah smiled. That's why I keep you around, Paula. As the meeting broke up and her crew prepared for the expedition, Sarah remained in the conference room, staring at the rotating image of the planet. Something about this discovery felt different from their usual cargo runs and routine surveys. There was a weight to it, a sense that they were about to uncover something that would change not just their understanding of life in the universe, but humanity's place in it. 6 hours later, the shuttle Icarus descended through Kepler 442c's methane atmosphere toward the polar region. Sarah sat in the co-pilot's seat next to Torres, watching the ice fields grow larger through the forward viewport. The shuttle's thermal imaging showed the network of caverns beneath the surface, glowing like veins of fire in the frozen landscape. Thermal vents are showing increased activity, Torres reported, monitoring his instruments. Whatever's down there is definitely reacting to our presence. In the passenger compartment, Dr. Webb was running final checks on his equipment while Tank and his 2 Marines, Sergeants Kim and Ockhaffer, secured their gear. The shuttle was cramped with people and equipment, but it was the best they could do with their limited resources. Landing site coming up, Torres announced, setting us down near the largest thermal vent about 2 clicks from the main cavern entrance. The Icarus touched down on a relatively flat expanse of ice with a gentle thud. Through the viewports, Sarah could see steam rising from cracks in the surface, creating an alien landscape of ice sculptures and frozen waterfalls. The ambient temperature outside was deadly, but their environmental suits would keep them alive for several hours. All right, people, you know the drill, she said over the comm as they suited up. Stay together, watch your air supplies, and keep your eyes open. Dr. Webb, you're the science lead on this one. Tank, security is your show. Any questions? There were none. These were professionals who had worked together long enough to function as a unit. They knew their jobs and trusted each other to do them. The shuttle's airlock cycled, and they stepped out onto the surface of an alien world. The ice crunched under their boots as they moved toward the largest thermal vent, their breath creating small clouds inside their helmets despite the suit's environmental controls. The landscape was hauntingly beautiful, with towering ice formations catching the weak light of the distant sun. Energy readings are off the charts, Torres reported, scanning with a handheld sensor. Whatever's down there just got a lot more active. Dr. Webb was already setting up his equipment near the vent, his movements quick and efficient despite the bulky environmental suit. The thermal output has increased by 30% since we landed. It's definitely aware of us. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's subarctic temperature. Something massive was stirring beneath their feet, something that had been sleeping in the dark for an unknown length of time. As she looked around at the alien landscape, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Contact," Tank's voice crackled through the comm with military precision. "Movement in the cavern entrance, 2 o'clock." They all turned to look where he was pointing. The entrance to the underground cavern system was a dark gash in the ice about 50 meters away, steam billowing from its depths like the breath of some massive creature. And there, just visible in the shadows, something was moving. "What do you see?" Sarah asked, raising her own sensor scanner. "Can't tell from here," Tank replied, his rifle ready but not yet raised. "It's big, whatever it is, and it's coming this way." The ground beneath their feet began to vibrate, a low thrumming that seemed to come from deep within the planet itself. Dr. Webb's equipment began registering massive energy spikes as whatever was in the caverns moved closer to the surface. "Captain," Tor's voice was tight with concern, "I'm reading seismic activity. Something really big is moving down there." As if in response to his words, a sound echoed from the cavern entrance that made them all freeze. It was deep and resonant, like the call of some enormous whale, but with an intelligence behind it that was unmistakably alien. The sound seemed to vibrate through the ice and into their bones, carrying with it a sense of ancient wisdom and profound sadness. "Did you get that?" Sarah asked Dr. Webb. The scientist was frantically adjusting his recording equipment. "Every bit of it. That wasn't random noise, there's a definite pattern to it. It's trying to communicate." Another sound emerged from the caverns, different this time but equally complex. It rose and fell in pitch, creating harmonics that seemed to convey emotion as much as information. And then, to everyone's amazement, it was answered by a similar call from somewhere else beneath the ice, miles away. "There's more than one," Webb whispered. "They're talking to each other." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They weren't just looking at some unknown biological phenomenon. They had discovered an intelligent species. An intelligent species that humanity had unknowingly been ignoring for decades. And as the alien songs continued to echo through the caverns beneath their feet, Sarah realized that their routine cargo run had just become something much more significant. They were no longer just explorers or merchants. They were potentially humanity's first ambassadors to an alien civilization. The question was, would that civilization welcome their presence, or would humanity's arrival herald something far more dangerous than any of them could imagine? As if in answer to her unspoken question, the ice beneath their feet cracked with a sound like thunder, and something enormous began to emerge from the depths of Kepler 442c. The ice shattered like glass under enormous pressure, sending crystalline fragments spinning through the thin atmosphere. Sarah and her team scrambled backward as something impossible rose from the depths of Kepler 442c. At first, it appeared to be just another ice formation, but as more of the creature emerged, its true nature became undeniable. The being that pushed through the planet's frozen surface was beyond anything in human experience or imagination. Its hide was a deep, iridescent black that shifted to deep purple and blue in the weak sunlight, covered in what looked like natural armor plating. Each scale was the size of a dinner table, and they moved with an organic fluidity that spoke of living tissue rather than mineral formation. The creature's head, when it finally breached the surface completely, was roughly triangular and bore 6 eyes arranged in pairs along its elongated skull. "Sweet mother of," Tank's voice trailed off as he instinctively raised his rifle, then slowly lowered it again. The weapon seemed laughably inadequate against something of this magnitude. Dr. Webb was frantically recording everything, his scientific training overriding his natural fear response. "Magnificent," he breathed into his comm. "The size estimates were conservative. This being has to be at least 8 kilometers long, possibly more. The biomechanics alone should be impossible." The creature, for lack of a better term, Sarah found herself thinking of it as a dragon, though it bore little resemblance to the mythical beasts of Earth legend, continued to emerge from the ice with surprising grace for something so massive. Its body seemed to flow rather than crawl, each movement deliberate and controlled. Steam rose from its hide as the creature's internal heat met the frigid air. What struck Sarah most forcefully was the intelligence in those alien eyes. They were not the cold, predatory gaze of a simple animal, but something far more complex. The creature studied the humans with the same careful attention that they were giving it, its massive head tilting slightly as it examined these strange new visitors to its world. "It's beautiful," Tors whispered, and Sarah realized he was right. Despite its overwhelming size and alien nature, there was something undeniably magnificent about the being before them. Its movements had a flowing grace that reminded her of dolphins swimming through Earth's oceans, but with a dignity and presence that suggested profound intelligence. The dragon lowered its massive head until it was only a few meters away from the human team. This close, Sarah could see that its scales were not purely black, but shot through with veins of bioluminescent material that pulsed in slow, rhythmic patterns. The creature's breath, visible as great clouds of steam in the cold air, smelled of ozone and something else, something clean and metallic that reminded her of the air after a thunderstorm. And then it spoke. The sound that emerged from the creature's throat was unlike anything they had heard before. It was simultaneously musical and linguistic, combining elements of whale song with what sounded almost like classical music. The tones rose and fell in complex harmonies, creating patterns that seemed to convey meaning even though the humans couldn't understand the content. Dr. Webb's translation software began working frantically to identify patterns in the alien speech. "There's definitely structure here," he reported excitedly. "Grammatical patterns, recurring phonemes, emotional modulation. This is genuine language, not just animal communication." The dragon seemed to pause, listening to Webb's voice through their external speakers. Its massive eyes focused on the scientist with what appeared to be curiosity. When it spoke again, the tones were different, slower, more carefully enunciated, as if the creature was attempting to adjust its communication for its alien audience. Sarah made a decision that would haunt her for years to come. She stepped forward, removing her helmet despite Tank's immediate protests, and looked directly into the creature's nearest eye. The cold air bit at her exposed skin, but her environmental suit's emergency systems would keep her alive for several minutes in the thin atmosphere. "Hello," she said simply, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. "I'm Sarah. We come from another world." The dragon's reaction was immediate and profound. It reared back slightly, its eyes widening in what could only be described as amazement. The bioluminescent patterns along its scales began pulsing faster, and it made a sound that was almost like laughter, deep, resonant, and filled with what sounded like joy. When it responded, its voice had changed again. The alien words were still incomprehensible, but they carried emotional undertones that transcended language barriers. There was welcome in that voice, and wonder, and something else that Sarah couldn't quite identify, a kind of profound loneliness that seemed to span centuries. "Captain," Tors said urgently, "I'm picking up massive seismic activity. There are more of them coming up from the deep caverns." As if summoned by the first dragon's call, the ice began cracking in several more locations across the thermal field. One by one, more of the massive beings began emerging from their underground realm. Each was slightly different in coloration and size, but all shared the same fundamental majesty and intelligence. Within minutes, the human team found themselves surrounded by a dozen of the enormous creatures. Rather than feeling threatened, however, Sarah experienced something she hadn't expected, a sense of being welcomed home after a long journey. The dragons positioned themselves in what was clearly a circle of greeting, their heads lowered respectfully as they examined their small visitors. Dr. Webb was beside himself with excitement. "The social structure is remarkable. Look at how they're arranged. It's clearly a formal greeting pattern. And the way they're modulating their vocalizations." He paused, listening to the complex harmonies the creatures were creating together. "They're singing. It's a welcome song." Tank kept his rifle lowered, but his posture remained alert. "They seem friendly enough, but let's not forget that any one of these things could step on us by accident. How do we know their intentions?" As if understanding his concern, the largest of the dragons, the first one they had encountered, moved with extraordinary care to avoid the humans as it shifted position. Its movements were so precisely controlled that Sarah realized the creature was making a conscious effort not to harm them, despite the vast difference in scale. "I think," she said slowly, "that they're more worried about accidentally hurting us than we need to be worried about them intentionally doing so." The truth of her observation became clear over the next several hours, as the dragons demonstrated a remarkable ability to interact with their tiny visitors without causing harm. They could focus their massive eyes on individual humans, modulate their voices to avoid damaging human hearing, and even manipulate small objects with appendages that emerged from their necks, structures that reminded Sarah of elephant trunks, but far more dexterous. Dr. Webb's translation software began making progress with the alien language, identifying basic concepts like greeting, curiosity, and welcome. The dragons, for their part, seemed equally fascinated by human speech and technology. They examined the team's equipment with gentle curiosity, their massive eyes studying the humans' tools and sensors with obvious intelligence. It was Tors who made the breakthrough that would change everything. While monitoring his equipment, he noticed that the dragon's bioluminescent patterns weren't random. They were responding to human speech and actions. When Dr. Webb spoke, certain patterns appeared along the creature's scales. When Tank moved, different patterns emerged. "Captain," he said excitedly, "I think their skin patterns are part of their communication system. They're not just talking with sound, they're using light as well." Dr. Webb immediately began studying the patterns, cross-referencing them with the audio recordings. What he discovered was a communication system of stunning complexity that combined sound, light, and even subtle changes in the electromagnetic fields the creatures generated. "It's like nothing I've ever encountered," he reported. "They're communicating on multiple levels simultaneously. The audio carries basic meaning, but the light patterns add emotional context, and the electromagnetic variations seem to convey abstract concepts. It's as if they're speaking in poetry, mathematics, and music all at the same time." The largest dragon seemed to understand that the humans were trying to comprehend their communication method. It began speaking more slowly, emphasizing the relationship between its sounds and the corresponding light patterns. Gradually, a basic vocabulary began to emerge. The concept they learned first was welcome. The dragons had a specific harmonic sequence combined with a warm, golden light pattern that conveyed greeting and acceptance. When Dr. Webb successfully reproduced the sound pattern, albeit crudely with human vocal cords, the dragon's reaction was one of delighted approval. The second concept they learned chilled Sarah to her core. The dragons had another pattern that combined deep, mournful tones with slowly pulsing blue-white lights. Dr. Webb's translation software identified it as alone or solitude, but the emotional context suggested something far more profound, a loneliness that spanned geological ages. As the day progressed and the team's understanding of the dragon language grew, a story began to emerge. These beings had once been part of a vast civilization that spanned multiple star systems. They were explorers, philosophers, and artists who had traveled between worlds for millions of years. But something had happened, some catastrophe or conflict, that had scattered their people across the galaxy and forced them into hiding. The dragons of Kepler 442c were survivors, hiding beneath the ice of this remote world and waiting for some sign that it was safe to emerge again. They had been waiting for over 2 million years. 2 million years, Dr. Webb repeated in amazement as his translation system parsed the time concepts the dragons were using. They've been alone down there for 2 million years, maintaining their civilization in underground caverns, keeping their knowledge and culture alive through pure determination. Sarah looked at the magnificent beings surrounding them and felt a profound sense of responsibility. Humanity had stumbled onto something extraordinary, not just another species, but the remnants of an ancient civilization that had been hiding in the dark corners of the galaxy for eons. The largest dragon approached her again, moving with that same careful precision to avoid causing harm. When it spoke this time, the meaning was clear even before Dr. Webb's translation. "Why did you come?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. These beings had been waiting in isolation for longer than human civilization had existed. They deserved honesty. "We didn't know you were here," she said. "We were traveling to other worlds, carrying supplies to our people. We found your energy signatures and came to investigate." The dragon's response carried tones of surprise and something that might have been hope. Dr. Webb's translation identified concepts related to other worlds, people, and travel between stars. "They want to know about us," Webb reported. "About humanity, about our civilization. I think they're trying to determine if we're like whoever they've been hiding from." Over the next several hours, with the help of the translation system and the dragon's patient cooperation, Sarah and her team managed to communicate basic information about humanity. They described Earth, human civilization, and the network of colonies that now stretched across dozens of star systems. They explained that humans were explorers and traders, generally peaceful, but capable of defending themselves when necessary. The dragons listened with rapt attention, their bioluminescent patterns shifting through colors Sarah had never seen before. When she described humanity's first steps into space, their successful colonies, and their growing understanding of the galaxy, the dragon's excitement was palpable. But when she mentioned that humans had encountered other intelligent species, some friendly, some hostile, the dragon's demeanor changed dramatically. Their patterns shifted to deep red and orange, and their voices carried undertones of ancient fear. Dr. Webb's translation system struggled with the concepts that followed, but the meaning was clear enough. The dragons were trying to warn them about something. Something that had driven an advanced civilization into hiding for millions of years was still out there, still dangerous and still searching. As the alien sun began to set over the ice fields of Kepler 442c, casting long shadows across the thermal vents, Sarah realized that their discovery had implications far beyond first contact with a new species. They had found the survivors of a catastrophe that spanned galactic history, and those survivors were trying to tell them that the danger was far from over. The question that would haunt her dreams for months to come was simple. If beings as advanced and powerful as these dragons had been forced to hide for 2 million years, what kind of threat could humanity possibly face that would require such extreme measures? And more importantly, by making contact with the dragons, had humanity just announced its presence to the very forces that had driven these magnificent beings underground in the first place? The emergency transmission from the asterisk Prometheus shattered the peaceful atmosphere of first contact like a gunshot in a cathedral. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system with barely controlled panic. "Captain, you need to get back here now. We've got multiple contacts approaching the system, and they're not responding to hails. ETA approximately 6 hours." Sarah felt her stomach drop. She looked at the dragons surrounding them, their massive forms suddenly seeming vulnerable despite their size. The largest dragon, whom Dr. Webb had begun calling First Speaker based on its apparent leadership role, seemed to understand that something was wrong even before the translation system parsed Rodriguez's message. "Unknown ships," Sarah said simply, looking directly into the dragon's enormous eyes. "Coming here, possibly hostile." The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Every dragon in the circle reared back simultaneously, their bioluminescent patterns flashing from the warm golds and blues of conversation to brilliant, angry reds and whites. The harmonic song that had filled the air since their arrival transformed into something that sounded like a warning klaxon mixed with a funeral dirge. "They're afraid," Dr. Webb said unnecessarily, his voice tight with concern. "Whatever's coming, they recognize it." First Speaker lowered its massive head until it was level with Sarah's position. When it spoke, the urgency in its voice needed no translation. The creature was trying to communicate something vital, its patterns cycling rapidly through complex sequences that Dr. Webb's equipment struggled to follow. "It's trying to tell us about the threat," the scientist reported. "The translation is rough, but I'm getting concepts related to hunters, devourers, something that consumes other species." Tank was already moving toward the shuttle. "Ma'am, with respect, we need to get back to the ship. Whatever's coming, we don't want to be caught on the surface." But First Speaker moved to block their path, not aggressively but with clear intent. The dragon's voice rose in pitch, and new concepts began flowing through the translation system. Hide, protect, safe place, and something that might have been sanctuary. "It wants us to go underground," Sarah realized, "into their caverns." "Captain," Torres interjected, "if we're cut off from the ship when those contacts arrive." "We'll be trapped down there with them," Tank finished. "No offense to our new friends, but I'd rather face whatever's coming with a ship around me than be stuck in a hole in the ground." Sarah looked at the dragons, seeing the genuine concern in their alien features. These beings had survived for 2 million years by hiding from some galactic threat. They were offering sanctuary to humanity's representatives, trying to protect them from whatever was approaching. But they were also asking her to abandon her ship and her crew. "First Speaker," she said, using the name Dr. Webb had given the creature, "our people are on the ship above. We can't leave them." The dragon's response was a complex harmony that conveyed concepts of understanding and regret. But then its patterns shifted to something new, determination mixed with what might have been resolve. Other dragons began moving with sudden purpose, their massive bodies flowing toward the various thermal vents scattered across the ice field. Sarah watched in amazement as they began descending into the caverns, their bioluminescent patterns providing illumination in the darkness below. "Where are they going?" Tors asked. First speaker remained, its attention focused on the humans. Through the translation system, concepts began to emerge: prepare, weapons, defend, and something that sent chills down Sarah's spine: last stand. "They're going to fight," Dr. Webb breathed. "After 2 million years of hiding, they're preparing to fight." Sarah made her decision with the kind of split-second judgment that had kept her crew alive for 15 years. "Tors, get us back to the ship. Dr. Webb, pack your equipment. Tank, contact Rodriguez and tell her to prepare for immediate departure." As the team moved toward their shuttle, first speaker called out to them. The dragon's voice carried tones of sadness and resignation, but also something that might have been gratitude. When Dr. Webb checked the translation, the message was simple but profound. "Thank you for ending the loneliness." The flight back to the asterisk Prometheus was tense and silent. Below them, the ice field was alive with activity as dozens of dragons emerged from the deep caverns, their massive forms moving with coordinated purpose. Some began positioning themselves around the thermal vents, while others moved toward what appeared to be hidden installations beneath the ice. "They've got technology down there," Tors observed, studying his sensor readings. "Energy signatures I've never seen before, but definitely artificial. They've been building something during their exile." When they reached the asterisk Prometheus asterisk, Rodriguez met them at the docking bay with a grim expression. "The contacts are moving faster than expected," she reported. "ETA now 4 hours, and Captain, they're big, really big." Sarah followed her chief engineer to the bridge, where the tactical display showed the approaching ships. There were 12 of them, each one massive beyond anything in human experience. The smallest was the size of a city, while the largest dwarfed some asteroids Sarah had seen. "Energy signatures are off the charts," Tors reported from his station. "Whatever they're using for propulsion, it's generating more power than our entire colonial fleet combined." "Any response to our hails?" Sarah asked. "Nothing, they're broadcasting something, but it's not directed at us. Rodriguez paused, checking her readings. "It's some kind of scanning pulse. They're looking for something." Dr. Webb, who had been silent since returning to the ship, suddenly looked up from his portable analysis equipment. "Captain, I need to show you something. The dragon language patterns I've been analyzing, they're not just communication. They're also a form of encryption." He transferred his data to the main display, showing the complex interaction between sound, light, and electromagnetic signals that comprised dragon speech. "This isn't primitive alien language. This is an advanced technological protocol. The dragons aren't just intelligent. They're the survivors of a civilization that was far more advanced than ours." "Advanced enough to hide from whatever's coming toward us," Tank observed grimly. As if summoned by his words, the ship's communication system activated with an incoming transmission. But the signal wasn't coming from the approaching ships. It was originating from the planet below. First speaker's massive form appeared on the main viewer, the dragon somehow having accessed human communication protocols. When it spoke, the words came through the universal translator in accented but clear English. "Captain Sarah Chen of the vessel asterisk Prometheus asterisk." The dragon's voice was deep and resonant, carrying the weight of eons. "I have learned your language from your computer systems. We must speak quickly." "How did you?" Sarah began. "My people were starfaring when your species was discovering fire. Your technology is quaint." There was no condescension in the dragon's voice, just statement of fact. "The approaching ships belong to the Devourers, a machine intelligence that consumes organic life to fuel its expansion across the galaxy. They have been hunting my people for millions of years." The tactical display updated as more information flowed from the dragon's transmission. The approaching ships weren't just large. They were weapons platforms, each one capable of sterilizing entire worlds. Sarah felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach as she realized the magnitude of what was approaching. "How many ships do they have?" she asked. "Thousands, millions. They have consumed entire sectors of the galaxy. My people once commanded fleets that could darken suns, and we barely escaped their advance." Then why are you preparing to fight, if they're that powerful? First speaker's massive eyes seem to focus directly on Sarah through the viewer. Because hiding has not saved us. They have found us again, as they always do, and because you have shown us that we are not alone. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They're not just here for you, they'll come after humanity next. Your species shows promise. You explore, you create, you adapt. These are qualities the devourers fear in organic life. They will not allow you to develop further. Rodriguez interrupted from her station. Captain, the lead ship is beginning some kind of bombardment pattern. Whatever they're planning to do to that planet, they're starting now. Sarah looked at her options with the cold calculation of a veteran space captain. They could run. The Prometheus was fast for a cargo hauler, and they might make it to the edge of the system before the devourers noticed them. They could hide, find some asteroid field or nebula, and hope to avoid detection. Or they could stay and try to help beings who had offered them sanctuary when they could have simply ignored humanity's presence entirely. It wasn't really a choice at all. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's intercom. "We're about to engage in combat with hostile forces. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you joined a cargo hauler crew, but sometimes circumstances make the choice for us." She looked around at her bridge crew, Torres at sensors, Rodriguez at engineering, Tank at tactical, and Dr. Webb still analyzing dragon technology. These people had followed her through everything the galaxy could throw at them. Anyone who wants to transfer to an escape pod has 5 minutes to do it. No questions asked, no judgment. But if you stay, we're going to try to help our new friends down there show these devourers that some fights are worth having. Nobody moved toward the escape pods. "Rodriguez, what do we have for weapons?" Sarah asked. "2 plasma cannons that were installed for pirate defense, some mining charges we were carrying for the colonies, and whatever creative solutions you can come up with," the engineer replied. "It's not much against city-sized ships," Tank observed. "No," Sarah agreed, "but it's what we have. Dr. Webb, what can you tell us about dragon technology, anything we can use?" The scientist was studying the data streams still coming from the planet. "They're sharing technical specifications with us. Defensive systems, weapon configurations, even tactical suggestions. Captain, their technology is centuries ahead of ours, but they're trying to help us understand it." On the main viewer, first speaker's image was joined by other dragons. Each one was sharing information, uploading technical data that made the Prometheus computers work harder than they ever had before. And behind them, Sarah could see the cavern systems of Kepler 442c coming alive with ancient technology that had been dormant for millions of years. "They're not just hiding anymore," Torres reported, watching his sensor readings. "Energy levels down there are climbing exponentially. Whatever they built during their exile, they're bringing it online." "The question is," Tank said grimly, watching the Devourer ship's approach on the tactical display, "will it be enough?" First speaker seemed to hear him somehow. The dragon's massive head turned toward the viewer, and when it spoke, its voice carried the weight of 2 million years of preparation. "We have waited in darkness for eons, keeping our knowledge alive, hopping for the day when we might stand with allies against the consuming void. Today, we discover if hope can triumph over despair." The lead Devourer ship fired its first bombardment, lances of energy that could crack a planet's crust, striking the ice fields of Kepler 442c. But instead of destroying the surface, the beams struck some kind of energy barrier that flared into existence around the dragon positions. The war for the survival of organic life in the galaxy had begun, and somehow, a human cargo hauler and its crew found themselves on the front lines of a conflict that spanned millions of years. Sarah looked at her crew, saw the determination in their faces, and smiled grimly. "Well, people, let's see what happens when humans and dragons fight side by side." The battle for Kepler 442c began with a light show that would have been beautiful if it hadn't been so terrifying. The Devourer ships descended through the planet's upper atmosphere like falling stars, their massive hulls glowing with the energy of their passage. Each ship was a study in mechanical perfection, smooth, angular surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, broken only by the weapon emplacements that bristled across their hulls like metallic thorns. From her position on the bridge of the Prometheus, Sarah watched as the dragon's hidden defenses came online. What she had initially taken for natural thermal vents revealed themselves to be carefully concealed weapons platforms, their crystalline structures rising from beneath the ice like ancient monuments awakening from sleep. Energy barriers flickered into existence around the dragon positions, creating a web of defensive screens that turned the planet's surface into a fortress. My God, Dr. Webb breathed, studying the readings from the planet below. The power levels they're generating. It's like they've turned the planet's core into a battery. They've been drawing geothermal energy for 2 million years, storing it for this moment. The first exchange of fire lit up the night sky of the frozen world. The Devourer's weapons were things of brutal efficiency, beams of concentrated energy that could vaporize mountain ranges and turn oceans to steam. But the dragons had spent eons preparing for this day. Their defensive barriers held against the initial bombardment, and their return fire was nothing short of spectacular. Columns of coherent energy erupted from the hidden weapon platforms, reaching up through the atmosphere to strike at the descending ships. Where the dragon weapons hit, the seemingly impervious hulls of the Devourer ships sparked and cracked, revealing that even machine perfection had its limits. Look at that, Tors said with something approaching awe. They're actually hurting those things. But Sarah could see what her sensor operator couldn't. The battle was going to be one of attrition, and the dragons were vastly outnumbered. For every Devourer ship they damaged, 2 more were descending from the outer system. The machines had patience and numbers on their side, while the dragons had only their desperate courage and 2 million years of preparation. Captain, Rodriguez called from her engineering station, first speaker is transmitting tactical data to us. They want us to integrate with their defense network. Sarah made her decision without hesitation. Do it. Whatever they need from us, give it to them. The Prometheus was a cargo hauler, not a warship, but her crew had faced pirates and system raiders before. They knew how to fight when the situation called for it, and this situation definitely called for it. The integration with the Dragon Defense Network was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Suddenly, her ship's sensors were connected to a vast array of detection equipment that spanned the entire planet. She could see the approaching Devourer forces in perfect detail, their ship configurations, weapon loadouts, even their tactical formations. They're not just throwing themselves at the defenses, Tank observed, studying the tactical display. They're probing for weaknesses, testing response times. These machines are learning how to break through the dragon defenses. First speaker's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. Captain Chen, we require your assistance for a specific task. Our weapons are powerful but limited in number. Your ship is small enough to avoid their primary targeting systems. We need you to strike at their command vessel. On the tactical display, one of the Devourer ships was highlighted, a massive construct that dwarfed all the others. It hung back from the direct assault, coordinating the attack with machine precision. Taking it out might disrupt their entire strategy. What exactly are you asking us to do? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. A ramming attack. Your ship's reactor, if overloaded properly, would generate sufficient explosive force to damage their command systems. The bridge fell silent. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the understanding in their faces. First speaker was asking them to sacrifice their ship and potentially their lives for the sake of a species they had known for less than a day. Captain, Tank said quietly, there might be another way. Those mining charges we're carrying for the colonies, if we could get them close enough to the command ship. A bombing run, Sarah finished. High-speed approach, drop our payload and get out before they can target us effectively. Dr. Webb was studying the technical specifications flowing from the Dragon network. The command ship's hull configuration shows potential weak points near what appear to be sensor arrays, if we could damage their ability to coordinate the attack. Sarah felt a grim smile spread across her face. Rodriguez, how much power can you give me? More than this old bucket was ever designed to handle, the engineer replied. I can push the reactor to 120% for about 10 minutes before we start risking a containment breach. Tors, plot us a course to the command ship. Use the planet's magnetic field and those asteroid fragments as cover. Tank, prep those mining charges for external detonation. Aye, Captain, came the chorus of responses. As the asterisk Prometheus began its attack run, Sarah opened a channel to first speaker. We're going to try to take out their command ship. If this works, How will it affect their attack coordination? The Devourers operate through a hierarchical command structure. Damage to their primary coordination node will force them to switch to secondary protocols, reducing their efficiency by approximately 40%. And if it doesn't work? There was a pause before first speaker responded. Then we will face our end together as allies should. The attack run was the most terrifying experience of Sarah's career. The Prometheus streaked through the space between planets like a comet, using every trick Rodriguez could coax from their aging engines to avoid the defensive fire from the Devourer fleet. Energy beams that could have vaporized their ship passed so close that the hull plating glowed with residual heat. "Command ship coming into range," Torres reported, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Targeting sensors locked on the weak points Dr. Webb identified." "Mining charges armed and ready," Tank announced. Sarah watched the massive Devourer command ship grow larger on the view screen. Up close, it was even more intimidating, a construct of dark metal and flowing energy that seemed to embody mechanical hatred for all organic life. "Drop charges on my mark," she said, her finger hovering over the release control. 3, 2, 1, mark. The mining charges erupted from the Prometheus cargo bay, their timer fuses already activated. Tank had programmed them to detonate in sequence, creating a chain reaction that would maximize the explosive force against the command ship's hull. "Charges away, coming about for emergency departure," Sarah called out, throwing the ship into a tight turn that stressed their inertial compensators to the breaking point. Behind them, the mining charges reached their target and detonated in a cascade of brilliant explosions. The command ship's hull cracked and sparked, and for a moment, the coordinated attack on the planet's surface faltered as the machine intelligence struggled to compensate for the damage. "It worked," Dr. Webb shouted. "The Dragon defensive network is reporting disrupted coordination patterns across the entire Devourer fleet." But their success came at a price. The command ship's defensive systems had locked onto the Prometheus during their attack run, and now a stream of pursuing fighters was closing in on them. The small craft were sleek and deadly, their weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. The Devourers wanted to capture them alive for interrogation. "Incoming fighters," Tank reported. 6 contacts closing fast." Sarah pushed her ship harder than it had ever been pushed before. "Rodriguez, I need everything you've got." "You've got it, Captain, but I can't hold these power levels much longer." The chase that followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse through the outer system. The Devourer fighters were faster and better armed, but they didn't know the quirks and capabilities of an old cargo hauler pushed to its limits by a desperate crew. Sarah used every asteroid, every gravitational anomaly, every trick she had learned in 15 years of space flight to stay ahead of her pursuers. Meanwhile, on the planet below, the Dragons were pressing their advantage. With the Devourer coordination disrupted, their defensive systems were able to target individual ships more effectively. One by one, the massive attackers began falling back, their hulls cracked and bleeding atmosphere. But Sarah knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The machines would adapt as they always did. They would learn from this attack and come back stronger, more prepared. Unless... "Dr. Webb," she called out while dodging another energy blast from the pursuing fighters. "The Dragon technology you've been analyzing, is there any way to integrate it with our systems permanently?" The scientist looked up from his console, understanding immediately what she was asking. "You want to create a permanent alliance, share technology and coordinate defenses across human space. The Devourers aren't going to stop with this planet. They'll keep coming, and next time they'll be ready for Dragon tactics. But if we can combine human adaptability with Dragon technology, we might actually have a chance," Tank finished. First speaker's voice came through the communication system, the Dragon having apparently monitored their conversation. "Captain Chen, your proposal has merit. My people have remained isolated for too long, believing that hiding was our only option. But your species has shown us that courage and innovation can triumph over seemingly impossible odds." "What are you suggesting?" Sarah asked, still focused on evading the fighters that were slowly gaining on them. "A sharing of knowledge. Your people's capacity for rapid adaptation combined with our technological advancement. Together, we might build something that could stand against the consuming darkness." Rodriguez's voice crackled with strain from the engine room. "Captain, reactors at critical levels. We need to shut down or we're going to have a containment breach." Sarah made another of those split-second decisions that defined her career. "All stop. Cut all power except life support." The Prometheus went dark and began drifting, its momentum carrying it toward a small asteroid field. The pursuing fighters slowed, confused by their prey's sudden stop. "What are you doing?" Torres asked. "Trusting our new allies," Sarah replied. As if summoned by her words, space around them began to fill with shapes emerging from the planet below. The dragons were coming, not the massive beings they had met on the surface, but smaller craft that seemed to flow and pulse with organic energy. Their ships were works of art as much as technology, flowing lines and bioluminescent patterns that made them look like living creatures swimming through the void. The Devourer fighters found themselves suddenly outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The dragon ships moved with an organic grace that the mechanical attackers couldn't match, their weapons creating patterns of energy that seemed almost musical in their precision. Within minutes, the fighters were destroyed or fleeing, and the Prometheus was surrounded by a protective formation of dragon vessels. "Welcome to the Alliance," first speaker's voice carried a warmth that transcended species barriers. "Let us begin the work of building a future where both our peoples can thrive." As Sarah looked out at the dragon ships surrounding them, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in what she was beginning to recognize as expressions of joy and hope, she realized that their routine cargo run had become something far more significant than anyone could have imagined. They had helped forge an alliance that might be the key to survival for all organic life in the galaxy. The question now was whether it would be enough to stand against the machine intelligence that had consumed entire sectors and shown no mercy for countless species over millions of years. The real war was just beginning. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442c, the galaxy had become a very different place. The alliance between humanity and the dragons, who called themselves the Kethmori in their own ancient language, had grown from a desperate partnership into something that neither species had expected. Genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed joint facility orbiting the Dragon homeworld, watching human and Kethmori engineers work together on projects that would have been impossible for either species alone. The sight still amazed her, massive dragon forms moving with careful precision alongside human technicians in environmental suits, their combined efforts producing technology that pushed the boundaries of what both civilizations thought possible. "The integration has exceeded all projections," Dr. Webb reported, joining her at the viewport. He had been appointed as the chief liaison for the new alliance, and the months of constant interaction with Kethmori technology and culture had left him both exhausted and exhilarated. "The hybrid defensive systems we've deployed around the core human worlds are already proving effective against Devourer scout incursions." Through the transparent aluminum window, Sarah could see the construction of the first joint warship, a vessel that combined human engineering principles with Kethmori biotechnology. The ship looked organic, its hull flowing like living tissue, but reinforced with human-designed armor plating and weapon systems. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, a symbol of what two species could achieve when they truly worked together. "First speaker wants to see you," Torres said, approaching from the communications station. "Something about the deep space monitoring stations." Sarah nodded and made her way to the facility's central chamber, where first speaker maintained his primary residence. The dragon had adapted remarkably well to working with humans, even going so far as to learn the nuances of human humor and emotion. It was a far cry from the lonely, desperate being they had first encountered beneath the ice of Kepler 442c. The central chamber was a marvel of hybrid architecture, vast enough to accommodate a fully grown Kethmori, but with human-sized platforms and interfaces that allowed both species to interact comfortably. First speaker was positioned near the primary holographic display, his massive form somehow managing to convey urgency despite the alien nature of his posture. "Captain Chen," he said, his English now fluent and tinged with what might have been concern, "our deep space sensors have detected something troubling. The Devourer main fleet has altered its approach vector." The holographic display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. Sarah had learned to read Kethmori tactical displays over the past months, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The massive Devourer fleet that had been slowly approaching their position had indeed changed course, but not in retreat. They were moving to intercept something else entirely. "What are they targeting?" she asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "A civilian transport convoy? 300 ships carrying refugees from the Proxima sector. They're fleeing a system that the Devourers sterilized last week." Sarah felt the familiar weight of command decisions settling on her shoulders. 300 ships meant nearly 1 million human lives. Families, children, elderly refugees who had already lost everything once and were now facing annihilation in the cold vacuum of space. "How long do we have?" 18 hours before the Devourers intercept the convoy. 24 hours before they reach optimal firing position. Sarah looked at the tactical display, calculating distances and response times. The joint fleet they had been building was impressive, but it was still under construction. Half the ships weren't even space-worthy yet, and the crews were still learning to work together. "What's our current force strength?" First speaker's bioluminescent patterns shifted to colors that Sarah had learned indicated careful consideration. 12 human vessels, 8 Kethmori ships, and 3 of the new hybrid designs, against a Devourer fleet estimated at over 200 combat units. "Those odds aren't exactly encouraging," Sarah observed. "No," first speaker agreed, "but they are better than the odds my people faced alone for 2 million years." Tank's voice came through the communication system from the tactical center. "Captain, we've got volunteer crews from both species asking to take out unfinished ships. They want to fight even if their vessels aren't fully operational." Sarah felt a surge of pride in both her own species and their new allies. In the face of overwhelming odds, the response from both humans and Kethmori was the same, a determination to stand and fight for those who couldn't protect themselves. "First speaker, what's your assessment? Can we mount an effective defense?" The ancient being was quiet for a long moment, his massive eyes focused on the tactical display. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of eons of warfare and survival. "The Devourers have one fundamental weakness that we have learned to exploit. They are machines, and machines think in patterns. They assume that organic life will act according to predictable parameters, flee when threatened, surrender when outnumbered, despair when facing superior force." "But we don't follow their patterns," Sarah said, understanding. "Precisely. Human adaptability combined with Kethmori knowledge creates possibilities that their machine intelligence cannot easily compute. They expect us to defend our installations, protect our homeworlds, follow conventional tactical doctrine." Sarah smiled as she began to understand what first speaker was suggesting. "But we're not going to do any of those things. Indeed, we are going to do something that organic life has always done better than machines. We are going to improvise." The plan that emerged from the next 6 hours of frantic preparation was audacious to the point of insanity. Instead of positioning their fleet to intercept the Devourers before they reached the refugee convoy, they would allow the machines to commit to their attack vector. Then, while the Devourers were focused on the apparently helpless transports, the joint human-Kethmori fleet would strike from an unexpected direction. The key to the plan was a Kethmori technology that had been theoretical until now, a method of temporarily masking the energy signatures of entire fleets, making them effectively invisible to Devourer sensors. It had never been tested on this scale, and failure would mean the annihilation of both the refugees and their would-be rescuers. "The masking field will only last for approximately 47 minutes, first speaker explained to the assembled fleet commanders. "Once we drop the field and begin our attack, we will have perhaps 20 minutes before the Devourers can reorganize their forces to counter us. 20 minutes to save 1 million people and destroy a fleet that outnumbers us 10 to 1, commented Captain Martinez of the human destroyer Defiance Asterisk. "I've faced worse odds." "When?" asked Kethmori ship leader Deep Current, her translation carrying tones of curiosity. "Never," Martinez admitted, "but there's a first time for everything." The laughter that followed, both human and the harmonic equivalent from the Kethmori, spoke to the bond that had formed between the two species. They were facing annihilation together, and somehow that made the prospect less terrifying. 18 hours later, the joint fleet hung in space, invisible to Devourer sensors and watching as the machine fleet closed in on the refugee convoy. Sarah commanded the operation from the bridge of the Asterisk Prometheus. Her old cargo hauler had been refitted with Kethmori technology and now served as the flagship for the combined fleet. Devourer fleet has reached optimal firing position, Tors reported. They're beginning bombardment of the convoy. On the tactical display, Sarah could see the refugee ships trying desperately to evade the mechanical precision of their attackers. Some succeeded, their captains using every trick in the book to avoid the energy beams that could vaporize their vessels. Others weren't so lucky. Masking field is holding steady, Dr. Webb reported from the science station. But the power requirements are enormous. We can't maintain this much longer. Sarah watched the slaughter unfolding on her screens and felt the cold rage that had driven humanity to the stars in the first place. The Devourers weren't just destroying ships. They were methodically exterminating entire families, entire cultures, entire futures. All ships, she announced over the fleet communication channel. This is Captain Chen. Today we're going to show these machines that organic life doesn't just survive, it thrives. It adapts, it protects its own, and it never ever gives up. She paused, looking at the tactical display one more time. Drop the masking field. All ships attack Pattern Omega. Let's go save some lives. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when the tide of the galactic war finally began to turn. The joint human Kethmori fleet struck the Devourer formation like a storm front, their hybrid tactics catching the machines completely off guard. Human ships darted through the enemy formation with reckless courage, drawing fire away from the refugee vessels, while Kethmori vessels used their superior technology to target critical systems on the larger Devourer ships. The hybrid vessels proved to be the key to victory. Combining human engineering with Kethmori biotechnology, they could adapt their weapon systems and defensive configurations in real time, making them nearly impossible for the machine intelligence to counter effectively. Sarah watched from the bridge of the Asterisk Prometheus as her mixed fleet tore into the Devourer formation. Ships were lost. Both human and Kethmori vessels fell to the overwhelming firepower of the machines. But for every Allied ship destroyed, 3 Devourer units were crippled or annihilated. The refugee convoy is beginning to escape, Tank reported. 80% of the ships have successfully jumped to hyperspace. Devourer fleet is attempting to withdraw, Tors added. But the hybrid ships are pursuing. They're not going to let them disengage easily. And then something unprecedented happened. The largest of the Devourer command ships, damaged and surrounded by Allied vessels, transmitted a message. Not the usual mechanical efficiency of machine communication, but something that sounded almost like negotiation. This is unexpected, first speaker observed. The Devourers do not typically attempt communication during combat operations. Dr. Webb was frantically analyzing the transmission. Captain, this is remarkable. The machine intelligence is requesting a cessation of hostilities. It's offering to discuss terms. Sarah stared at the communication display, hardly believing what she was hearing. For millions of years, the Devourers had been an implacable force of destruction, consuming entire civilizations without mercy or negotiation. Now, faced with the combined might of human adaptability and Kethmori wisdom, they were asking to talk. Put them through, she said. The voice that emerged from the speakers was mechanically perfect, but somehow different from previous Devourer communications. There was something in it that might have been uncertainty. Organic entities, the machine intelligence said. Your tactical adaptations exceed our computational parameters. You do not behave according to established patterns. We request clarification. Sarah looked at first speaker, saw the ancient being's patterns shifting to colors she had never seen before, something that might have been hope mixed with disbelief. What kind of clarification? She asked. You fought to preserve entities not of your immediate genetic grouping. You risked destruction to aid strangers. Your tactical decisions prioritize survival of others over strategic advantage. These behaviors do not conform to organic survival imperatives as we understand them. Sarah smiled, understanding finally what was happening. The machine intelligence had spent eons assuming that organic life was driven purely by survival instinct. They had never encountered a civilization that would risk everything to save strangers, that would form alliances based on principle rather than necessity. We call it compassion, she said simply. We protect others because it's right, not because it's profitable or strategically sound. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute. When the Devourer voice returned, it carried a tone that Sarah had never heard from machine intelligence before, confusion mixed with something that might have been curiosity. We require time to process this data. Our fundamental assumptions about organic behavior may be incomplete. And with that, the Devourer fleet began withdrawing, not in defeat, but in something far more significant, uncertainty. For the first time in millions of years, the machine intelligence had encountered something it couldn't understand or predict. As Sarah watched the massive ships disappear into hyperspace, she realized that the battle for Kepler 442c had been just the beginning. Today's victory wasn't just military, it was philosophical. They had shown the Devourers that organic life was more than just survival instinct and territorial competition. They had proven that compassion and cooperation could be weapons more powerful than any technology. "What happens now?" Tors asked, watching the last of the Devourer ships vanish from their sensors. First Speaker's massive form seemed to straighten with something that might have been pride. "Now we build something new, not just an alliance between our species, but a coalition of all organic life. We show the galaxy that cooperation is stronger than conquest, that diversity is more powerful than uniformity." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of possibility settling on her shoulders. "And maybe, just maybe, we teach a machine intelligence that there's more to existence than consumption and expansion." As the joint fleet began the long journey home, escorting the rescued refugee ships to safety, Sarah looked out at the stars and smiled. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, but for the first time in millions of years, organic life had something it hadn't possessed before: hope. And in the depths of space, a machine intelligence that had never doubted its purpose for eons began to recalculate its assumptions about the nature of life itself. The dragon had wept for 2 million years, but now, surrounded by friends and allies, it sang songs of joy that echoed through the void and promised a future where no species would ever have to face the darkness alone.